Welcome to the Solemn Vanguard channel. Today we go over part 2 of the Getting into Premium series. Like I said before, this is all about deck design. And so today we focus on triggers. Because as the game progresses and goes on, more and more fancy types of triggers have come out. And so crafting the perfect trigger base for your deck, comparable I would say almost to a mana base in Magic, is actually a huge part of making a good deck. In Overdress, you only have a few little options right now. In V, you have like a couple more, but in Premium this thing goes wide open. GN before, so many effect triggers and so forth came out. So let's just go over the types one by one, and then we go over some ground rules and little tips. Now before we get into that, I do want to say 50 cards is doing a massive promotion. Like, they've never given this type of discount before. They also added so many damn products, it's insane. There's Revival Selection, there's Clan Collection stuff, there's even Premium Collection stuff. So it is basically the opportunity to pick up some premium staples for your deck. And of course also Overdress. There's also like sleeves and basically it's crazy. It's like the biggest sale type of promotion they've ever done. Be sure to use the code Solemn for a discount. The link will be in the description. It's actually huge. You should probably check it out. So let's go over the different triggers and also which types have been released over the years. So we start off with heals. Every deck can only run 4 heals total. It is likely the most impactful trigger after Over Trigger, and you use them to G-Guard. In Premium you can discard a heal in order to get a powerful Guardian, and every single clan has different ones. It's a big part of Premium. First of all, we had your typical heal back in the day. It was 10,000 shield, it gave 5k power, it has no ability. Those are basically pointless now. Now around the same time you had the outlier like Lozenge Magus, which was a heal which returned itself to deck, but we didn't really see further experimentation on effect heals after that anymore, until we got the Fighters Collection where you got a new heal, which when discarded for a specific G-Guard gives you a specific effect. Every single clan got one, but some of them had different skills. I think you had like a discard and draw effect, you had a counter charge effect. These were better than what you had access to, because basically you had vanilla heals or effect heals. Well, obviously you're going for the effect heals, but these days we don't really tend to run these anymore. With that being said, you can still keep it in the back of your mind. Maybe your specific deck can actually use that specific heal, who knows. After that we got a new type of effect heal, and these were, I would say, the most groundbreaking ones up till that point, because they were just that good. These were heals that when discarded for a G-Guardian could bind themselves away together with another heal, and then you could choose to counter charge or soul charge. Some people refer to these as resource heals, and some clans actually to this day still run these resource heals. That being said, not all clans, because now you gotta weigh the options. Do I take these weaker heals? Because remember, they only give 5,000 power on their trigger, whereas V heals and so forth give 10,000, but maybe the resource is worth it, and so now you have another option to weigh. Maybe your deck just eats through resources and you can take that 5k loss. Also in the early game they have less shield. They're only 10,000 shield, whereas the new heals are 20,000 shield, and Heal Guardians, again, we'll get to that. So after that we had V. In V we saw V heals. Just the base power went up of every single trigger. So heals suddenly had 20,000 and they gave 10,000 power when triggered. So the standard basically became either you run a V heal for its insane stats, or you run the resource heal for the counter charge or soul charge. Now in November, another option is being added with Heal Guardians. These are basically lower shield overall, but give incredible, and I mean incredible, defenses to your deck. Beyond that, they can also give you a damage when you're being damage denied. So when you look at this lineup of heals, you gotta consider, why does my deck choose the heal that it does? If your deck is a Cray Elemental vanilla deck, there's an archetype where you play a bunch of vanillas, which means cards without skills, and then you basically get value from that through Cyclone. Then you might want to go for the V heals. Or alternatively, because you really like the 20,000 shield. Maybe you're a Geese deck or something like that, I don't know. Or maybe your deck again eats through the resources, you go for the resource heals. However, most likely you will actually choose the Heal Guardians, because the ability to slow down your opponent that much through this incredible heal is just super value. So while you can see in the heal department you have choices, generally you're gonna be pushed to those Heal Guardians. They're actually a very big deal. Next, let's talk about draws. Now draws are a bit easier to go over. You have the initial draw. The first one they ever made was just 5k shield, 5k power on trigger, that's it. Okay, generally those suck. There were a few decks back in the day that really wanted to run like a high count of draws in order to get to their pieces. I'm thinking of something like Aqua Force. But generally, you know, you draw that 5k shield, 5k power, you're like, ugh, no way. Even in V, you notice no one even runs those anymore. Even with the heightened 10k power and so forth, it's very hard to justify. Now again, some decks do, but we'll get to that. So then the other draw that came out was your go-to soul at 3k. Basically, they were thinking, hey, no one's running these draws, but maybe if they have an extra skill, it becomes worth it. So you got your new effect draws. Again, like my example earlier with Aqua Force, you loved using your Battle Siren Malika on your Tidal Assault, and so you gladly ran it. Now we also had effect draws like Hysteric Shirley. You know, you push it into soul, you soul charge. This is an incredible draw for Dark Irregular, and back in the day, it actually got bought out because of how useful it was for the clan. Draws, in my opinion, completely changed when V came out. Historically, draws, again, you had to run some because you wanted to draw cards and they had some value, especially in Peace Reliant decks, but no one really loved to play draws. What really changed the game completely there is the Draw Perfect Guard. This is a card that's a Sentinel and works like a grade 1 PG from back in the day, but it's also a draw. So not only does it let you draw a card, but it's also like the most powerful shield in the game. And so just like that, draws were the staple. Always, forever. You played 4 draws minimum, and then you could add more, not decrease. So draw PGs are a very big deal. Now while in V, generally like 95% of decks just want to max out the draw PGs and go from there, in Premium, this is not really the case as much. I'd say the majority still play their 4 draw PGs, but because back in G, the Perfect Guards had fantastic skills, there's actually very solid arguments, depending on the deck, to just run the grade 1 PGs and forego the draw PG altogether. A good example of this would be Luard. You know, Dragsaver Ezra's is an incredible card, and people were like, I don't want to run the draw PG, I really want that Ezra skill, and so boom, you run it. If you were to try to build ZTP these days, I'm sure they still run Arca. When you had Ange Mine 2 years ago, they chose to run Aqua because Aqua is just that good. And so while draw PGs are definitely the standard in Premium, you gotta think about it a little bit more because at least you have the strong skills. Another interesting fact here is that Overdress PGs are technically better than PGs from back in the day. Overdress PGs can sometimes be free. Now you gotta ask yourself the question, hey, do I want the G skill, the Overdress freeness, or the draw PG? And there's even more in that category, but that's gonna be for another video. Now one type of deck that really loves draws is Gize, or basically any deck that needs to last a long ass time to get their shit together. Gize is a slow control deck, very reactive, tries to live for very long, because when they reach Gize and then they live another turn, they basically auto win. For this reason, this deck historically has played like 8 draws. Another good example of a deck that's comparable to this is Spike's brother GB8. This is like a hybrid between a combo and a control deck, I want to say, but because it needs to last all the way to GB8 and it needs to have a large hand to do all the combos, they also historically have ran like 6 to 8 draws in order to get everything together and live a long time to get to that point. So while this is not something you tend to see in V, you can't even see it in Overdress, in Premium you can have decks that will gladly go over that 4 draw maximum that we often saw in V. And maybe some decks were like, oh, I'll play 6, and that was like the upper limit. Whereas here, in those types of decks, that's like your lower limit. You play 6, or maybe you play 8, or maybe you play 9. So once again, while draws have historically been kind of shit, don't discount them completely in Premium because your deck might just need it. When I won BCS France Premium 2 years ago, I actually played 12 draws. Yeah, I played 0 heals, just 4 crits, 12 draws. The deck just had to draw into an insane combo and then auto won. That was the deck. I think I called the deck back then 12 draws featuring Yellow Bolt or something like that. So again, keep your mind open because it's perfectly possible to go wild even with draws. Then we get into critical triggers. Now crits, wow. Crits have been completely changed a billion times. So we start of course with our vanilla crit once again. Just 10k shield, 5k power, no effect. These are no longer playable in general. There's very little reason unless maybe they have an archetype name that you desperately need. An example of this maybe, and that's a big maybe, be Revengers. Let's say you wanted to build a pure Revenger deck where you really need every card to be Revenger, then you'd be forced into the old critical triggers because they still have the Revenger in their name. But beyond that, and even then I just wouldn't, but beyond that, there's no reason to run these old crits. Now after these, some clans got effect crits that were very generic. A good example is Supersonic Sailor. A few other clans got stuff like this. It's essentially a critical trigger that you push into soul to countercharge. That was a big deal. Not only do you get +1 soul, you also get a CC. Some clans are maybe so greedy on resources that they still like to run these super old crits. It's very rare, but it's possible, so keep it in the back of your mind. A good example of this was back in the day with Ange Mine, that's 2 years ago or so. They would run the Choo Choo crit. She goes to soul to countercharge, and you use the Choo Choo name together with a stride to get some value. Most decks don't run these, but still keep it in the back of your mind. The more useful one of those, however, was the, what I like to call, Upstart Goblin crits. In Yu-Gi-Oh! Upstart Goblin is just a card that replaces itself. Well, here in Vanguard, these crits also replace themselves. We have Psychic Bird, we have Rough Seas Banshee. So OTT, Grand Blue. Essentially, you call these, push them into soul, draw. Now, what's weak about these is the 10,000 shield in comparison to the V crits, which have 15,000 shield, and they only get the 5k power defensively and offensively, so that makes them weaker in defense and offense departments. However, some decks really just want to find their pieces or are desperate for soul. They will gladly run these. But it's very meta dependent. When it was the Ezel format 2 years ago in my Grand Blue deck, I didn't dare to run Rough Seas Banshee anymore, because I was like, wow, if I hit this defensively, I'm ruined. Whereas if I hit a V defensively, I might just survive and get another turn. That was literally a game-changing decision you made right there, just on the type of crits you run. However, if the format then changes, for example in my recent Springfest top 4 Grand Blue list, I did run the Rough Seas Banshee because the format was no longer reliant on hitting a 10k defensive trigger and more reliant on finding certain pieces quickly. Once again, that decision is a major game changer for that deck. And so again, that's one more dimension of deck building that you need to keep in mind. Now another type of crit that came out, yeah, we're gonna go far here, is the crits that go to soul and give 3k power. So basically like the Battle Siren Marika draw that I talked about earlier, other clans got this crit go to soul get 3k type of deal. Examples are Dark Irregular got it, Great Nature got it. In general, these crits are just dog shit. You need to be extremely hungry for soul in order to want to play that, because the 3k just isn't that big of a deal. But again, it's possible. You know, you never know, maybe there's some kind of deck that's completely broken when one rearguard just has 3k extra, so it hits over some type of defensive and then does infinite attacks. I don't know, it's possible. Just know they exist, but they're probably not that great. Then you got even more effect crits. These just have different effects completely depending on the clan. So I'm not gonna go every single one because it's impossible, but you have to consider like Blue Storm Despina for Maelstrom and so forth. You just started to get all these weird crits that did completely clan specific things. You may want to go through your card pool and check these out because maybe your deck benefits greatly off these. Blue Waves also got one and they like abused it to draw a lot of cards. Once again, more effect crits like that. Now then they made another type of effect crit that went to soul and drew you a card when you were on GB and had a specific grade 3. So let's say you were playing Nitros. If you had a Nitros Vanguard, this thing would go to soul, you would draw a card. I think it also gave power, but these were later largely overshadowed. Now then we get into V. In V, you had the new crits. 15k shield, 10k power on trigger, and generally these are just better than everything that came before, except for those few effect triggers. Some clans really just want that soul with the CC, or the Upstart Goblin type of critical trigger, or if your clan actually got an incredibly broken crit skill, sure, go ahead and play it. Maybe your Maelstrom deck really wants that Despina. Now then, we got premium collections, and in these premium collections, we basically got the 15k V crits, but also with skills. And these essentially started completely replacing those vanilla criticals, except for the fact that, like I mentioned earlier, there were decks that wanted complete vanillas just for the sake of having, you know, all their effects go off. Recently, Zazan was banned, Tempest Sphere was banned, so now this is largely, you know, kind of a bad idea, but some decks might still play Cyclones to flip them up with other strides, that way make these better boosters, or maybe they play that vanilla superior ride, which you can still do. For this reason, don't discount the V crits completely, but in general, the premium collection crits are just better. You have the same stats, and you have your skills. One of the premium collection crits goes to soul when your Vanguard attacks. You draw a card, give 10k power. Just a really solid skill. Get that free soul, add some power to your Vanguard, draw cards, like it's just good all around. The other Premium Collection crit counts as a grade 3 in your hand when discarding for Stride. Once again, incredible. Why would you not run that, right? And then we got critical Sentinels. These had 30k shield, but they are Sentinels. So you have to choose between perfect guards and these. Or you can run a split. Maybe you run 3 draw perfect guards and 1 crit Sentinel. That's a possibility. Once again, 1 extra option added to that pool. And then finally, I hope I'm not forgetting any, you have the new overdressed criticals from set 3. Which go to Soul, give a little power, and also still have the good stats. Moving forward in the life of the critical trigger, let's say, you will likely almost always pick the Premium Collection criticals together with maybe the Rough Seas Banshee, the Psychic Bird, depending on if your deck likes it. And then finally, you would go for the overdressed crits if you need even more crits for some reason, or you're that desperate for Soul. Maybe you run enough grade 3s that you no longer need the Premium Collection discard, but you need a lot of Soul, and so you run both the Soul Charge crit from Premium Collection and the Overdress crit. That's possible. I don't know of a deck that currently wants to do that, but once again, keep this in the back of your mind. Maybe in 8 months some card comes out that has crazy soul blasting shenanigans, and now you have access to these soul chargers. By always being aware of all these little options, deck building becomes far more interesting, and maybe you see a little interaction that someone else hasn't seen yet because you know the entire card pool and someone else didn't. Next, let's go over fronts. Now, fronts have historically been probably the worst trigger because crits are almost always better. A lot of power up is usually given by various skills anyway, so fronts no longer do that much, and they don't draw you cards like draws do. However, some decks do still run fronts. And recently Overdress also got the new fronts which give you extra shield. So it is possible that you're running a very slow grindy deck that just desperately wants that 20,000 shield. I've seen some people say, oh, I'm gonna build Geese and I really wanted 20,000 shield fronts just as a defensive option. That's perfectly valid. Another interesting thing about Geese is that they don't want to crit their opponent. They're trying to damage deny a little bit usually. And so if you only run draws and fronts, you can be very, very certain that you will never, you know, crit accidentally. So that's pretty interesting there as well. With that being said, most decks don't run fronts. And you would need to have a very, very particular reason. Maybe there's something your deck does that makes fronts good. Maybe you're a Glory Maelstrom deck, and that, you know, has a little interaction with fronts that make it really good. Or maybe you're a God Hand deck, which just needs to run fronts. But overall, historically, fronts just haven't been that great. Then we get to stands. Now, stands would be the second most controversial trigger, I would say, but we'll get to that. Stands were historically bad. Kinda like fronts, you know, they were the forgotten child. Generally, a deck just didn't want to run stands. There were a few, you know, throughout history, there's always little exceptions, but in general, stands, most decks just didn't want them. Crits were usually better. That all changed when they started making stand with effects. Crits never needed to get insane effects because crits were already good. Bushiroad didn't need to incentivize anyone to play crits because everyone was already playing crits. So they printed a bunch of stands with amazing effects just to tell people, please, use some stands, please. That led to a lot of stands getting banned one by one because they were simply too powerful. Once again, every clan got some effect stands. I'm not going to go over every single one because that will take a century, but some were just incredible and a lot of them got banned or limited. You know, you had Mick getting limited, Urwatar limited or banned or semi, I don't even remember. You have your Monochrome of Nightmare Land, your Refrost, your Lisbeth, your Taro. Every one of these effect stands almost had some crazy thing it could do that no other unit could do. And so right now, if you are building a deck, usually you're not running stands unless you have a crazy effect stand or you're gonna abuse these stands in some way. We saw this with Valk and Blade Master, you know, doing their ridiculous loops based on stands. These were then hit with a new rule change. But those are basically the primary reasons to run stands at all. Stands still have only 10k shield and the 5k defensive trigger, which is really weak. Trigger itself also isn't that great, so really the only reason to run stands is either a crazy effect or abuse of it. Luard is a great example of this once again. They have both. They like to abuse stands because Dagda creates extra attacks just for standing, and Cursed Eye Raven is just a crazy effect. Finally, we get to the most controversial trigger of all, the over trigger. There's actually not much to be said here. You either use the one that's from your nation or you use the Kree Elemental one. Generally, the nation one is stronger. The nation over triggers still have the 100 million and all the bullshit that comes with it. And they have a broken effect on top. Every single one of them has a game-changing effect. Now the Kree Elemental one doesn't, it's just another 100 million, but that doesn't mean you should discount it. When we saw the Springfest results for Premium, you had topping players running Nation overtriggers, but you also had topping players running Kree Elemental overtriggers. The Kree Elemental overtrigger basically has two things going for it. First of all, being able to spread 100 million in two places can still be incredibly impactful. Maybe your deck just has two restanding rear guards. I don't know which deck, but maybe that's the deck you're running. If you can check the overtrigger Kree Elemental and put the 100 million on those two restanding rear guards, that is going to be incredible. That's going to be 4 100 million attacks. That is something you wouldn't have with your Nation overtrigger. More importantly, however, is that some of the Nation overtriggers automatically make your Vanguard hit. The Stoicheia overtrigger automatically adds 10k to the front. The Darksaits overtrigger automatically powers up your Vanguard, and so forth. And so these overtriggers are actually awful for damage denial. Let's say you're in a meta where your opponent does something crazy with 1 CB on turn 2. Who knows, right? Maybe that's the case. That was the case, at least, in the Springfest Online format. If you then run a Stoicheia or a Darksaits deck, and accidentally deal your opponent damage because of that power on your Vanguard that's not optional, now you suddenly lose the game from that. That is a big deal. For that reason, some people actually played the Kree Elemental, so they could at least choose to not give power to the Vanguard and damage deny this way. Now this is rare, but once again, if that is a tool that you have in your toolbox that other players do not, that's another few percentage points that your deck is better at handling a given meta. So now, I know this has been a very long episode so far, but I hope it was at least useful. Let's build a baseline type of trigger base. I would say the baseline is 4 Heal Guardians, 4 Draw PGs, 1 Nation overtrigger, and then 7 Premium Collection crits. So this will obviously be a 4 and 3 split, and the way you decide which one is basically how many grade 3s do I have and how much soul do I need. If you need a lot of soul and you don't have many grade 3s, then you play the discard grade 3 for stride crit. If you have a lot of grade 3s and you don't have a lot of soul, you play the soul charge crit at 4. Again, this is a very, very tiny difference, so you can really choose, but every little difference matters. And that is basically your baseline of a trigger lineup. If you are building a premium deck from scratch, you start this way. 4 Heal Guardian, 4 Draw PG, 1 over, 7 Premium Collection crits. That's the easiest. That's going to be the correct lineup for, let's say, 70% of decks. Now from here you can think a little bit more. Which clan am I playing? Does my clan have some type of broken stand that I absolutely need to run because it's just that good? Maybe that's the case. Maybe your Dark Irregulars and Monochrome of Nightmare Land is one of the best stands in the game. Okay, now you start cutting some of the Premium Collection crits. Maybe you already soul charge enough in DI, so you just cut the Premium Collection soul charge crits, you put in your Monochromes. Cool. That's your base right there. Similar story for Pale Moon, similar story for Luard, maybe your Cursed Eye Raven, or whatever that circus thing is. That's your base. However, in case of Luard, is there a PG I really want to run? Okay, we take out our Draw PG, we put in our Ezras. Now we have 4 new slots in that Draw PG slot. What do we do with that? Well, look at your deck's goal. You're gonna multi-attack with Dagda? Okay, let's put in some more stands. If you put in 4 stands, that means you have 8 G triggers. Is the format currently aggressive? What if you are rushed early on? Will that little bit of shield be enough? Will the 5k defensive trigger be enough? Maybe not. Maybe you need to take out a few of those stands again, put in some more of those Premium Collection crits, that way you can hit a defensive that's bigger and you have more shield in the early game that lets you live more easily. Or hey, maybe your deck is just hyper aggro. PGs be damned. We cut those Draw PGs out, we put in crit Sentinels. So now we're running 11 critical triggers. 4 crit Sentinels and then 7 of the Premium Collection crit. 1 over trigger, 4 Heal Guardians. Maybe that's the ultimate aggro type of deck. You just don't give a damn about PGs anyway. Maybe your deck eats so much CB. You need to play the resource heals. Okay, we cut our 4 Heal Guardians, put in the resource heals. However, what if we play 2-2? this is also an option. Some people like to mix and match those heals. So they play 2 resource heals and 2 of another heal. Maybe it's 2 resource, 2 heal guardian. That way you could guard with the heal guardian early on, and then later you can discard the resource heal and bind it with the heal guardian. Because the resource heal never stated that both heals need to be resource heals. It's only the second one that needs to be one. So first you guard with the heal guardian, cool, then you do the resource heal. It's the exact same thing as having used 2 resource heals. So that's a little cheat code. Now you can use both the resources and the heal guardian. And once again, maybe you're a deck that just needs a billion draws to get its combo pieces or to last a long ass time like Gize. And also what's interesting about Gize is your trigger power doesn't work anyway. So you can still play G either for their art or for their skills without really getting any of the bad sides of running a G trigger, which is that lower 5k power. So I hope you can see that there's actually a lot of thought that goes into designing your trigger base in Premium. We have once again 10 years worth of different cards with all types of different skills, and in the G era, Bushiroad wasn't that afraid of giving us crazy effects on the triggers even. So this just opens up design space completely. Again, when in doubt, 4 Heal Guardian, 4 Draw PG, 1 Nation Over trigger, 7 Premium Collection crits, and you'll probably be fine. Most decks will absolutely be fine. From there, you can start experimenting depending on what your deck actually needs and asks for. But this is, in my opinion, the ultimate starting point. Hope you found this interesting. Next time, I'm not sure what we're talking about just yet. It's possible that we go to the grade 1s, or we go to the grade 3s, or we go to the G zone. What do you want? Let me know in the comments down below, and the next episode of How to Get Into Premium will be whatever gets the most votes, I guess. Once again, be sure to go to 50 cards and use the code Solemn for this massive promotion. I think it started just today. I assume a lot of this stuff will run out because the prices are just heavily discounted. There's a bunch of interesting stuff also for Premium because of the Premium Collection stuff, the Revival Selection stuff, the Clan Collection stuff, just a bunch of stuff you really want to pick up for every format basically. So yeah, use the code Solemn. Hope you found this interesting. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you soon. Ciao.